So thank you everyone for coming today. Again, a bit like Chris, apologies if you're at the APSI conference. There might be a little bit of a broken record point here. Because what I'm going to talk today about, and many of the conversations again this morning are about community involvement. Similar to Chris's focus, my area is very much looking at how do we use the data to drive the decarbonisation and energy efficiency. Again, switch them around depending on which audience you're focusing on. How do you drive that sort of investment? How do you drive that change using the data that's available to you to effectively get quicker in terms of the business case process and all of the things that go alongside that? So I'll give you a very quick run through of this really, and in person, obviously. So that's me. I don't want to go too much detail into myself, but my focus really is delivering our 2030 action plan. And it's city-wide, it's not just council-wide. So there is two elements to it. There is the internal council emissions that we focus on using our carbon inventory that we have all the detail on, and then we have a city-wide tracker. Not all local authorities do the same thing. Everyone's a little bit different, and it's one of the things when I came into the role I brought in to make sure that we could track both, because we were just looking at the city-wide emissions, but we now track council and city-wide. We've made some really good progress as well, which I'll talk to you about in the next slide. So over the past sort of 6 to 7 years really, we've delivered key elements of the action plan. So we've seen an 11% reduction in our scope 1 and 2 emissions since 2019, 2022. Some key stats there. And we've done quite a lot of things in terms of delivering our actions. So we've achieved tons of our actions really. I'll show you that on the next slide. And one of the things as well is we're recognised internationally. I'm not here to blow around the trumpet, but it's one of the things that we're really proud of. We were recognised by the Food and Agricultural Organisation, which is part of the UN, for our efforts around youth engagement, which was really important because ultimately it's not just about, it's bringing as many people on the journey as possible and trying to decarbonise the city. So here's some of our key stats. We've got 3 key thematic areas, so energy, transport, adaptation and sustainability. 68% of our actions have been completed, transitioned to business as usual or superseded. Our scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, so funnily enough I was going to be talking today about scope 3 emissions. I won't bore you with that specific presentation. It's really interesting if you're clued into it. But ultimately our emissions are broken down as you can see on the screen, but most of the emissions really relate in our organisation to our scope 3. So it's an area that we're trying to focus on. We're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking more about energy and how do we decarbonise that via a tool that we developed. So when we look at the gap in our capabilities, one of the key things we noticed was that there's no way to align our corporate and our citywide emissions. And that's really hard because when you talk about scope 3, for example, in the corporate space, you talk about your supply chain. Whereas if you talk about scope 3 at a citywide level, you actually start talking about things like airport travel, for example, or air vehicles, planes, that's what they're called. God, how bad's that? Air vehicles. I was watching Blade Runner last night, and it just came to mind. So there you go. Aeroplanes, not airplanes, we're not American. Aeroplanes. That counts as scope 3 technically at a citywide level. So the challenge is marrying those two things together, and it's really important because if we're measuring things, we need to be able to measure them in the same way at different levels. Also, when we're looking at delivering cost savings, I'm sure Chris will agree, we need to do these things at pace because we have challenging budgets. We're fortunate, as most local authorities, that we had the 3-year funding settlement, which has meant that we've got more time to plan, whereas previous to the government, the last government, we'd have it on a yearly basis. So it gives us more time to plan things, but we still need to move at pace because our residents want to see us decarbonising, and also energy saving. Our finance directorate wants to see us saving money. So we've got to be doing these things as quickly as possible. So the question we really asked was, is there a tool that exists that can pull data up, bottom up from our buildings, from not just our own buildings, but the citywide buildings, and then help us trial different interventions in the city? So, would a heat pump work here? Would a heat network work here? So that we can make better, quicker decisions that can then feed into business cases, then secure funding that we can deliver quicker. So that's the question we set for ourselves. So the tool we developed was working with NECA and funding from the hub. The tool we developed was a spatial planning tool that is at this moment a proof in concept, but we're taking it to the next level. The idea of it is it takes interventions in the city, it looks at buildings, it looks at other stationary assets, and looks at all the different data sources. It takes those, it applies 19 interventions, so solar on roof, fabric, infrastructure improvement, heat network connection, air source heat pump, ground source heat pump, all of those things, and then applies them to the tool and then effectively generates a quick high-level business case that can then feed in both internally and externally to help decarbonise, because it gives you the numbers effectively to enable you to say, well, if we put a heat pump in here, it will save this amount of money, it will cost this much, and it will do this. So I'll just take you through the tool really quickly to show you how it works. First bit, so how do we set it up? We need the data. Everything, when we look at how we deliver energy savings or carbon emission reductions, you need the data that sits behind that to make the case for those interventions. So you get that data. Invariably, as we'll all know, data comes in different formats. It'll come in PDFs, it'll come in an Excel spreadsheet, it'll come in .csvs, it'll come in Word docs. We have to clean that data and make it into a form that can then be ingested. You then refine it and then you visualize it. The key bit of the tool involved pretty much the second half of it. The first bit's identifying and cleaning the data is always a manual process. So it might be an area that we see going forward where AI is able to do that more effectively, but it's still quite a manual process. So there is always a manual piece in this still. So that's the process we followed. So the tool that we developed, the key bit is how does it work? So the first bit, it gives you a city overview or a rural overview. It doesn't have to be city focused. That basically shows you the key data. This example here it'll be your left-hand side. It's my left and your left, same way around. Anyway, doesn't matter. Shows you the different building types with a different colour. Then you've got a scenario configurator where you basically say, I'm going to take X number of buildings, I'm going to apply solar, I'm going to apply heat pumps to these, and then it then generates a review and a report that then shows you all the information. It's a bit difficult to explain fluidly. It's a lot easier to use as a tool, but I'll take you through an example to show you how it works. So let's say you know that there's a funding pot coming up, whether it's a grant or whether you know that you have a maintenance budget with some of your boilers failing that are valued to X amount, and that enables you to effectively upgrade, improve your existing assets. So in this example, for example, you might have 1.5 million of funding in a grant that could be used to spend on solar. So what you do here is you effectively use the tool. On the left-hand side, you effectively configure it, the scenario, which effectively says it's as simple as this. I would like to, with 1.5 million, install these interventions in these buildings. So literally a drop-down, pulls all the information from the system, click the button, it then gives you a review of the impact of that in terms of the energy savings, the actual cost of delivering the solution and the carbon savings, and then generates that in a report. You can then press a button and effectively export all of that into a different tool that then can be used for your business cases. Why this is really powerful is it means that our finance directors, our buildings directors can quickly see, without having to dig out the data themselves, look at different spreadsheets, look at different tools that already exist. They can quickly see how impactful those interventions are. And then it then means that we can then go to that next level of going, okay, well, we know what the information is telling us. How do we then build the detailed case to then get the money? Which many of us in the room, if you work in a local authority space, know that we can get stuck in meetings and meetings and meetings about discussions around meetings and having a meeting about a meeting. The whole point of this is we try and cut through this and say, well, actually, let's not have a meeting about what tool we could use. This tool does it all for you and then effectively generates a report for you. So the strength of it are that you can layer different data sources. You can mix and match different interventions. So let's say in a certain area in the city, you know that there's a generation constraint, so you can't put solar on the rooftop, but there's loads of capacity from a demand perspective on the grid, so why not put in place a heat pump in that area? You can mix and match those in different ways. You can calculate the cost of the interventions and the potential energy and carbon savings. It develops a high-level business case. It uses AI. What's really quite interesting about it is you can ask the tool in language, in writing it down on the screen with a keyboard. Why? My brain's all over the place today. You can type it. That's the word. You can type it with the keyboard. The air vehicles. You can type it with the keyboard. You can type a question and it will give you an answer. That's what I'm getting to. You can visualize the data so it helps you understand it better, and then you can produce really easy reports, and it's scalable to other local authorities because all the data here is scalable to all of the ones in the North East. It's scalable to Yorkshire and the Humber. It's scalable to pretty much everywhere where the data exists in the same format, which it pretty much does because we're using data like EST data sets. We're using information about land usage that comes from the OS maps and things. So it's replicable. So what could it do better? We want to develop more interventions without predefined data. So the challenge with the tool currently is we've basically built it around 26 to 28 buildings in the city. The logic behind that is we know that those buildings have detailed REBA designs, so we know the impact of the technologies that could be put on them. But the great thing with AI and the learning aspect of it is you can feed that into the tool and then it then learns how to develop the same approaches for other buildings that don't have detailed designs. So that's the next stage of our development, which we'll talk about in a moment. It doesn't factor in the cost to borrow and financing interventions. Really important, obviously. We need to be able to know the borrowing cost and the repayment cost of all of these interventions because ultimately, if you're borrowing at 10%, 20%, I know that's not the case, but if you were borrowing at that level, you'd have to have a serious income generation aspect from selling the energy either via private wire if you're putting in place solar. So you have to include those costs to make sure you get a picture of the whole thing. And it's also about bringing the internal teams on the journey with us. So a little bit like Chris mentioned just now, it's all right us as sustainability officers and climate officers saying we should be doing this from a climate perspective, but we need to basically turn the language to the right audience. So our finance team they only really care about the energy savings and the cost savings, which is fine. So one of the bits in terms of what we need to do going forward is make sure that all of those teams are brought on the journey with us. So, just got a couple more slides now, John. So, future development plans. We're looking to secure additional funding, but we've used our internal budget and we're about to build up the tool to include all Newcastle buildings. So that's not just city council buildings, it's also community buildings, schools, leisure centres. It could be the Siemens energy plant that produces and serviced wind turbines down Walker Bikeaway. All of those things are being built into the tool. We're looking to expand it over the North East, so we've had some really positive conversations with our colleagues in the North East as part of the combined authority. And as I say, if we get this replicatable, you can then apply it to different local authorities without too much issue. It's just about the data fed in initially. Looking to develop those AI capabilities and very much around enhancing the ability to produce business cases that feed directly into a template that you can almost present back to our management board so they can see it. And it's about expanding the interventions and looking at other decarbonisation thematic areas like transport. So that summarises it really. I could run through that, but I wanted to take you through one final slide that's a really interesting piece of work we're starting to talk about and that links directly into this. What we've been doing across the cities, we've developed a carbon intensity and an opportunity to carbonise score. Now we have to be a bit sensitive with this because Newcastle just enters into pre-election period either today or tomorrow. So anything I say that could be potentially political and could annoy certain political parties, I have to be a bit careful with. We know who we're talking about, but anyway, there you go. But the bit that's really interesting here is the carbon intensity map on the left-hand side basically gives you a view of each of the local authority areas in the city that have really high carbon intensity, so basically gas focused and what have you. The map on the right-hand side gives you a view of the areas to decarbonise. Now, actually what that map should really have is the red should be green, because the red is basically saying that has a high opportunity to decarbonise, whereas currently it looks like it's bad. So if you take the red from the left and the red from the right and overlap, they're the areas we should be targeting as a city for all of these interventions. So in those red areas, for example, high carbon usage, high gas usage, really inefficient, really fuel inefficient homes, really poor insulation. As Chris mentioned, and I'm sure other local authorities are no different, we don't have a magical money tree, so we have to target our interventions as best as possible. This tool that uses this data and other tools that are out there that enable us to do this and say, this part of the city is the place we need to decarbonise. This is the part of the city where we can deliver the greatest cost savings for communities and people who are struggling from a fuel poverty perspective. And this sort of data helps us do that in a targeted way that enables to deliver real impact with the limited resources we have. So that's pretty much everything from me today. You got the joy of hearing me in person or seeing me in person and hearing my garbled English for the morning. But there you go. Well, have a great day, everyone, and I'll be around for the rest of the day to talk to you as well.